Hey there, Chad here. Thanks for joining me. I want to give a quick update about my playthroughs of Ostranauts and News Tower and some other projects that I'm trying to get kicked off here. Hope you'll give me just a minute of your time to hear me out. On Friday night, I guess there's no simple, easy way to put this. On Friday night at about 9:15, my house was hit by a tornado. That's the long and short of it. Now that's the short story. The longer story is wasn't a tornado at the time. It was a funnel cloud. The tornado had lifted up less than a minute before it got here. It tore up trees in our area. I haven't seen a whole lot of house damage for anybody. I think my neighbor's gutter got knocked down. We've lost a lot of trees in the area, and I'll expand on that here in a second. But for those of you not from a tornadic area, the difference in a tornado and a funnel cloud is that a tornado is generating debris from the ground. It's effectively in contact with the ground. A funnel cloud is otherwise a tornado that is not impacting the ground. So what we experienced is a funnel cloud passed directly over us. And there is a debris path of trees that are damaged because of that it's very clear to see where it went and what happened. The National Weather Service has declared it was an EF2 tornado while it was on the ground. It was on the ground for about 15 minutes. And by the grace of God, it lifted up less than a minute before it got here. The storm was moving at a tremendous speed, about 60 miles an hour. And that's not entirely unheard of in this part of the world, but that is atypically fast. That's moving quite rapidly. That presents a bunch of different dangers and problems when that sort of thing is happening. But let me give the quick rundown of my status right now. First of all, everybody was home and everybody was safe. We're perfectly fine. As like I said, by the grace of God, we have no damage to our house that we have seen so far. There will be somebody coming out to do an inspection, but the immediate appearance is we got by pretty easily from a house perspective. Our vehicles were okay as well. We are going to probably lose a couple of trees. We haven't actually lost them yet, but we have one tree that is almost completely gone with branches. It's a pine tree. And you might see it in some of the videos that are coming up. It probably looks a little more full than what it actually is. Now, I've thought we would lose this tree in the past. We've had some other serious storms that took the top off that tree. We've had some winter storms that have caused branches to freeze and break. And literally one side of the tree has no branches because the top branch broke at one point and took all the branches below it out. So that tree is about 80 feet tall. And that's something to kind of note as well. When it shows up on the video, you'll have at least some perspective of what I'm talking about there. Anyway, so from my perspective, me and my family are perfectly safe. We did lose power for an extended period of time, so I'm guessing about 27 hours or so we were without power. We didn't have cell or internet or really voice phone. We don't have a landline anymore. We have a cellular landline. I think a lot of people are familiar with that at this point. The cell towers in the area, the two closest to us, were badly damaged. One was completely torn down. Then, of course, everybody being without power and without other access to internet, they're using their phones, and so that certainly stressed the system. But for a good 24 hours, we really couldn't get any kind of internet or cell service at our house. We had to drive to Ellisville to be able to send messages and texts. And it was kind of funny because, we'd hit that spot on the road where all of our phones would start receiving all the messages from people checking on us or responding to things we had sent. It's kind of funny in a way, all of a sudden all four of our phones start chirping away, but not funny for the people that were more directly impacted. And that's a bad thing. So there's a piece of me that feels a little guilty saying we were hit by a tornado because we weren't all that affected. There are houses that are gone in our area. And this isn't entirely unusual in my area where I live. We get tornadoes constantly. We had a period last year in April and May where we had tornado warnings at least once a week, and they were all significant storms that were passing through and did cause damage in that. So I guess at some point it's just going to be you, and it was our turn. Now, Some folks that follow my channel have probably heard me mention this in the past. My wife is actually, by education, a meteorologist. She does not practice that from a work perspective. There's a lot of reasons for that, and we won't get into any of that. But she has, in the United States, she has both her bachelor's and her master's of science in meteorology. So weather is something we pay really close attention to. And when my wife tells me to go to the basement, I go to the basement. I don't, we don't play games with that. And this time, I'm really happy that we did go to the basement. The experience was interesting. I have been near tornadoes in the past, and we always hear, one of the telltales is people say it sounds like a freight train. And it's an excellent analog. It really is. The sound of the storm as it is approaching, it does sound like a freight train because it's kind of getting closer and closer, and it's loud. It's got a lot of energy and things like that. So the analog is really sound. And I have used that in the past. I guess about 12 years ago, a tornado passed within half a mile of our house. We were living in another place, and we were paying attention to that one. It was daytime, so it wasn't quite as dangerous to be, paying attention. And of course, again, my wife has a lot of experience with dealing with storm chasing and storm watching and things like that. So we probably more risky than we should be, but we're also intelligently risky, I guess. We kind of know. You never know exactly what's going to happen, but we're not, going into it blind when we're looking from our porch at what might be happening around us, things like that. And I remember hearing a storm and thinking, wow, yeah, that sounds like a freight train. Wow. And being really amazed by that. That was nothing compared to what we went through on Friday. We were in our basement, and at one point it wasn't so bad. We had lost power about 15 minutes earlier, so that's always a struggle. You're kind of scampering around in the dark, tripping over things that you're not sure are there. We did have flashlights, but that's not perfect, as you can imagine. And so we're kind of stumbling around down there, and I kind of said to her at one point, we had the kids in the bathroom in the center of the basement. It's the most walls between outdoors and indoors, I guess, and they had the animals with them, and that was really kind of what we were having them take care of. And I think I mentioned this. My kids are adults. One's in college, one is just out of college. Both are still effectively living here. My daughter was home for spring break, is why she was here at all. And my son wasn't working that night. His gig actually got canceled because they were concerned about weather. And so they were in the bathroom with the animals, and my wife and I were in the basement, the unfinished part of the basement. And I said to her, "How close is it?" And she said, "It is right on top of us." And the resonance of her saying that hadn't even died out in the the echoey part of the basement when all of a sudden it sounded like a freight train was rolling by our house and was picking up volume and getting louder, and it just grew and grew and grew. And the thing that was really weird about it was there's a point, if you're standing outside when a gust front goes through, we have a lot of trees in the area. The area we live in requires you to have a certain percentage of your yard or your property covered in trees is effectively what happens here. So we have a little, I don't want to call it it's a wooded area that's immediately behind our house. The trees kind of hang over our deck. And if you're sitting out on the deck and a gust front comes through, it sounds like a jet engine with the wind blowing through the trees and the leaves and that. It gets very, very loud. It was exactly like that, except we were in the basement, inside, not out on the deck. And it didn't stop getting louder for a very, very long time. And when I say a long time, I mean, we're talking less than a minute total, but when you're used to hearing a gust front come through and it builds, it's like 5 seconds, and then it's at max volume and it just hangs there. And, so familiar with that, not familiar with it going that 5 seconds and getting to that level of volume. And then it continues to go and go and go. And, it went, I'm guessing it probably was about 30 seconds of build. And there was this, it just kept getting louder. It was so loud that we were standing about 5 feet apart, and I had to speak to her in elevated, language, elevated voice. It was not a conversational voice. It was not shouting, but it was certainly, hey, can you hear me over there kind of thing. And the house made amazing sounds that you just never want to hear if you're in a building. It was really peculiar. At first, I thought maybe it was lifting part of the roof off or something. There was like almost like a domino effect sound, and that was kind of weird. Yeah, I can't quite figure out a way to exactly explain it, but my imagination was going with, oh, there's, pieces are getting ripped off, or a tree branch fell and is dragging across the roof or something like that. And yeah, that was uncomfortable feeling, but then it's these creaks and pops, and you're all of a sudden realizing, my gosh, that's just right there, right above me. What's going on? And we both kind of experienced the same sensation that probably wasn't real, but it felt to us in the flashlight, lit basement. It felt to the two of us like the rafters above us for the first floor of the house. It felt like they were vibrating a little bit. Not something you could really say you saw. It was more of a feeling or a hearing than anything else. And it was probably something else happening, but that was kind of the closest tactile response we could kind of come up with as to what we were both thinking it sort of felt like. So this building went on for probably 30 seconds, maybe 40 seconds. And then where it got really creepy is that it just suddenly stopped. It was like turning off the faucet. There was suddenly just no sound, completely dead. And we waited about 5 seconds, maybe a little longer than that, but we got to the unfinished door and went out, and we looked out. We do have an exposed lower level with a walkout, and we went to that door, and we were looking out, and there was absolutely nothing happening. Now, again, power was out, so it was very difficult to see. There was not a lot of lightning in this storm, surprisingly. We usually get very powerful electrical storms that roll through, particularly in this kind of a situation. And, it was notable that there wasn't nearly as much lightning as you would expect with this storm. But when we would see the lightning flashes, we could tell it really wasn't raining. It was almost like a hard drizzle, really, at the time, not buckets and buckets of rain or anything like that. And nothing was moving. Everything was perfectly still. And that was just, again, added to the creep factor. We sat it out for probably about a minute and then decided to go ahead and traipse upstairs and survey the damage. Like I said, we really didn't have any. By the grace of God, we were spared. Again, there are homes nearby that were certainly roofless. In fact, we learned that the reason our power went out is, or at least in part of why it took so long for it to get put back, was a roof had blown off of a house and severed several arteries for power into our area. So there are effectively still people. This is Monday. I'm taking the day off work and kind of trying to get caught up on weekend things that didn't get done. There are people in our area that still don't have power, and that's concerning. It's been over 48 hours at this point. That's starting to get a little scary. I can't imagine if you have a health situation or, a sick child that needs some sort of assistance. I don't know what you do in those situations. So that's just, one more thing to kind of think about and be grateful for that we didn't have to deal with and are past having to deal with it. So some of the video you're seeing here is what I took with my drone of Samaritan's Purse coming out and helping. They did help us, but primarily my neighbors with the large trees down. What do you do for that? We live in a hilly area. It's very difficult for my neighbor across the street, from his backyard to the street where we would try to dispose of something like a tree. It's probably a 20-foot climb from his backyard where that tree went down, and Samaritan's Purse came out and cut it up with us and was able to, we were able to dispose of it in the wooded area there without having to haul everything to a curb to get it hauled away and things like that. Another tree actually fell in the street. You kind of see that one here in some of these videos as well. And That one was a little easier to deal with because really it was just cutting that up and moving the branches about 5 feet so that they can be ready to be hauled off at some point. Anyway, the long and short of it is I'm not getting any videos done this last weekend. My time that I usually spend in doing videos is I try to get one or two done during the week in the evenings. That didn't happen this week because it was a action-packed week for me. And I had expected to get them all done on Saturday and Sunday and then didn't have power, so couldn't do that. I know this is a long and drawn out way to say, sorry guys, there's no video for a week, but thought you might like to hear what was going on and why, and maybe hear a little bit of the behind the scenes here on the why. I do like to tell stories. My wife insists I got that trait from my mom. My mom was a fantastic storyteller. And I do enjoy that. I like sharing things that I've experienced that I think are unique. This is absolutely one of those. I don't think the majority of people have been directly under something like a tornado, and it was everything that it's billed to be. I've got to be honest with you. For those of you that don't live in a region where tornadoes are common, please don't believe anything Hollywood tells you about tornadoes. They're wrong more than they're right, unfortunately. I remember several years ago, there was a TV series here in the U.S. that featured an episode where there was a tornado coming to town. That's literally how they kind of played it out. It was this episode where everybody was hunkered down for 4 and 5 hours at a time, waiting for this tornado to pass over. And of course, they all lived in LA. I'm not going to mention the series because I'm sure it'll do more damage to my reputation than than not telling you what it was or pretending I didn't remember. But I remember my wife and I just laughing like crazy at this idea that people sit in their basement for 4 hours waiting for the doom to arrive. It's nothing like that. You have a couple of minutes to respond. You have a couple of minutes to do whatever you're going to do. And it's part of the reason we prepare for that kind of thing is, we're ready. We know that I'm not going to pretend that we have everything lined up and, like a military installation or something, but we have flashlights that are around and handy, and we have things like that are nearby. We know where we're going to go if we go in the basement. We've got that bathroom. If there's just a couple of us, if there's more, there's a corner that we intend to go to that's the most protected. And you just kind of react. It's not something you sit around and wait for. You don't have a whole lot of warning usually. This one, exceptionally fast. So if it had stayed on the ground another minute, it would have hit our house. It picked up less than a mile from our house, and it was moving at about 60 miles an hour. It went 14 miles in 14 minutes is what it did on the ground. That's tremendous speed. There you have it. I hope you'll hang around and catch my videos when they start back up. I have every intention of starting them back up next week. I'm hoping nothing gets in the way of allowing me to do that, but you just never know. Yeah, that's one of life's unpredictable parts, isn't it? So I do appreciate you listening to me ramble on about this incident. And, I find those kinds of stories interesting. I love hearing them myself. And I guess that's why I thought I would share what we experienced here. I do intend to get back to Ostranauts and News Tower. I think that both of those are fantastically fun games. I'm enjoying them quite a bit. I would like to kind of branch out into a couple of other things just because it feels like it might be time to start doing that. When Ostranauts releases its next version, I think there'll be a big uptick there again. And I think I'm going to do a new beginner series because the first half of my beginner series is started in 13, and 14 did change a lot of things. In fact, inside of 14, a lot of things changed. If you recall the tail end of 14 a few months ago, they changed a lot of the UI. And I think I like it better at this point. Initially, it was a little intimidating, but I think we're there now. But new folks coming in that want to learn the game, they're going to be a little surprised when it doesn't line up to what they're seeing. So that's probably something you can expect to come in the near future. And as for News Tower, it has a ton of new content coming, it sounds like, and some major changes to how it works. At least from my perspective, the developer might not think they're hugely major. It sounds like they'd been playing with a few of the ideas for quite a while, and they're just trying to figure out the best way to implement them so that it's the least different for everybody that's playing it. And we'll see what else that I jump into in the future. I do intend to have some more interviews and discussions with developers and some other YouTubers that I've come to like and know. And I hope you'll look forward to those on this channel as well. Don't hesitate to check out my drone channel. I'm trying to remember to put a link in here to that. It is brand spanking new, but I decided I was going to start posting my drone videos in a separate channel. So there you have it. Thank you so much for your time. And until next time, fair travels.